to another episode of the Crazy Stupid Marketing Show, the show where we talk about all the crazy stupid stuff that people do in marketing and how to not do crazy stupid stuff, but instead to do really meaningful things with your time and your budget. And I'm really excited about this conversation today because we're really heavily leaning into something that's not crazy or stupid. But it's also something that not a lot of people, businesses are doing because of our current human drive for efficiency. Although I feel like there will be commentary about efficiency and what that actually means as part of this conversation. But today we are talking about the power of two. And you know what's fun about this is sometimes we have the power of more than two on the show, but always minimally we have the power of two on this show, because I'm a big believer in that. Like, I have good ideas and other people have good ideas, and then between us we have even better ideas. And if we put people together in the conversation, we come up with better ideas. And if we're going to give anything to the market, it might as well be the best ideas that we can give. So today we're talking about this power, maybe unseen power, that happens when you add an additional human resource to the equation. I'm not going to dive into that yet because we're going to dive into all of the perspectives on that. And as we're exploring this power of two, while you might see two people on the video here today, this is actually a power of many, because we also have the opportunity for you to get into the conversation as well in the chat, which a bunch of awesome people are already doing. So Meryl, thank you for always being here. Yes, we sprung ahead an hour. So we'll see how many people can come. I think LinkedIn user continues to be Wolfram. So if you're not Wolfram, let me know and I will make sure that I welcome you to the show. We have Perry joining us
Perry
as well.
Noppert.
Yep. So all of you and everybody who I didn't call out yet, who maybe hasn't put a comment in there yet, please get into the conversation. Ask your questions, share your perspectives, your insights, your experiences. It allows the conversation to become the most robust conversation it can. And that is what we are all about here. Okay, you guys, first of all, can I introduce you to my favorite power of two partner right now, John?
I feel like that's a small sample size, Tracy. But thank you. Keep it. Stop. Come on.
I do a lot. I do a lot of collaborations. And I will say one of the things that's my favorite about a conversation with John is that it is wholly unpredictable. And one of the things I love about emerging conversations is that you don't have a predetermined destination for where it is supposed to go. And we are going to 100% lead into that today, because this is where the coolest possibilities lie. So before I give you too much framing on the awesomeness that I think is John, would you like to introduce yourself to the crew? Who are you? And why is power of two something that is so resonant with you?
I'll do that. I'll do it really briefly because I want, let's actually do what it says on the tin and have a conversation, right? So the introduction for me is, I don't necessarily like to focus too much on the past, but I will say I'm both a recovering big shot fund manager, right? And that is something to recover from, as well as more seriously, a recovering perfectionist, right? And I think the perfectionist thing sits really well with your point. If you can't have an emergent discussion, if you know you want to get to, right? Excellent marketer, excellent father, excellent employee, whatever, right? If you have a determined endpoint, you're never going to get to the endpoint that you might wish for, but not exactly know what it is, right? Mm-hmm. So recovering perfectionist, recovering fund manager. And I'm using the experience that I incredibly fortunate to have over 25 years dealing with all large cap corporations, management teams all over the world, right? To try to help existing teams, whether they be Fortune 100 companies across the globe, or honestly, I'd much rather help the people in the middle, as with our friend John Morley, or indeed people all the way through the organization. Unfortunately, sometimes the biggest leverage point is to start with the bosses. I don't like that that's true, and I'm working on changing that, right? But that's the goal is, and where we get to why power of two is so important to me is that in the work that I've done, the advisory work that I've done, which is largely me helping people. But it's always better when I can bring a friend like Tracy, or we can we can name others, but perhaps we'll leave them out for now. But I mean, when I can bring someone, even if that someone is just a neutral observer, they're already helpful. But you don't bring neutral observers. You bring people who are obviously your friends and allies who care about whatever it is that we're working on, but also who might care about me, and even better, might have a skill set that is as you and my skill sets are. They overlap, but they're hugely complementary.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's talk about why this isn't happening right now.
I have two thoughts. I have two thoughts on that. The first one is I don't think it's revolutionary. I don't think it's crazy, right? We work in groups. Humans work in groups. So it's not that it's so crazy. It is, though, it's not common. It's not common practice. So there's that one is. And the other thing is, if you say, well, if I have one McKinsey consultant, or one coach or one therapist, I certainly don't want to pay for two therapists. I certainly don't want to pay for two McKinsey consultants. Do you have any idea what their day rates are? Right. So there is both. It's a little bit different to be talking to two or three or more people than it is to talk to the one expert, right? The expert. And now I realize there's a third reason, but it's a little bit different. Also, there's the assumption that it becomes less and less economic. But the third reason is, I think that people would say, well, I like talking to one. I know who that, I have a known quantity in that one person. As soon as you add another, then the complexity goes way too, and not the complexity doesn't go in a hey, happy fashion. It goes through the roof. I think that's the fear.
And I think that it is the experience of a lot of people too, that you put like more voices in a room and it becomes so complex and you can't make decisions. And even it's been interesting for me because as like there's continuing narrative in sales and marketing that like buying groups are getting bigger, right? So now the complexity of the sale is going up because these buying groups are getting bigger. And there's more complexity. And I think what we're missing is this kind of break-even point, or maybe it's a like different way to measure value completely. That is like there is value added, and if we can't quantify the value, then we don't want to give it like dollars. But I don't know. I mean, I've just been in the room so many times when the value of this is so pronounced, like having one of those observers to just like see and feel the vibe in the room, to observe things that are interdynamics that are happening, and it allows for more things to be seen in this big circle of things that most of them are things we don't know. We put an additional person in the room and we start to see more of those things. So they become things that we know we don't know. And then we can address the things we know we don't know because
bring them in.
We know them.
Yeah. Well, yes, and yes. I think the other point about people fear increasing complexity, I want to tie it to the first reason of, it's just not common. It's not, it hasn't, generally we like to deal with 1% at a time. I think another reason that it's not done is that commonly, the common belief is if you add another person to the room, if you add two more people, you're adding two more voices, right? The people, our value is determined by how much and how important it is what we say, right? Whereas I will name a friend here. Johnny Moore is one of my great collaborators and does Unhurried Conversations. But Johnny Moore's his thesis for the last month has been the greatest gift, and I think it was Simone de Beauvoir, so the greatest gift we can give someone is attention. But Johnny said, what are we all craving for? We just want to be heard, right? And so the question is, can we change the framing such that if you're in a room now with two listeners, right, now you have twice as much chance to be heard, rather than if you're looking at it, completely arse backwards, do you have twice as many chances to get drowned out, right? It really depends on the quality of the people that you're interacting with, and what are their intentions? Why are they there?
Yeah. Well, and this is like the listening focus is an interesting point because, again, if I look at a lot of the corporate decision-making rooms I have been in, there is no one in there whose sole job is to listen. Mm-hmm. And there might be someone whose job it is just to record notes, right? And they might actually be doing the job of a listener, but they don't get the opportunity to like reflect that back in any way besides here's a summary of my notes. And so again, this is the thing where I find it really interesting. It's not even that we don't even have that resource in the team. The teams are like, it's already in the room, but we're not using it for the thing that could actually extract more value out of the conversation because we didn't create that as a role going in.
We didn't create it, nor did we name it, nor did we pay for it. Did we say, hey, look, it's great. Thank you, Jim, that you're taking notes. Also, we're going to ask every 5 minutes, right? For you just do a little recap if you want, or don't even do a recap. Do a jazz improvisation, Jim, of the most important thing that you wrote down in the last 5 minutes. Like just go like this, orange parrots. It was orange parrots, right? Right. But we don't do that. And I'm just thinking, I don't like to do cultural stereotypes, but stereotypes are always stereotypes for a reason. One of the classics in meetings in Japanese corporations is that the most senior person in the room talks last. All right. That doesn't mean that expressly that person is therefore recording everything and is going to actually do a reflection on what everyone else has said. But de facto, that's what they're doing because the big boss doesn't get to say anything until the minions have spoken, and then the juniors, and then the middle, and then you get to the boss. He has to, I'm sorry, I said he, but it's Japan. Sorry, right? But I mean, he has to listen. He has to listen. And the question is, what happens if you assign that role to one person, or you make sure that somebody's always filling that role? One of the neatest things, and I didn't mind using the word neat there, even though wasn't raised in the 1950s, but one of the neatest things that I've found in having a witness, having a friend, an ally, a wise uncle or wise aunt who comes with me, is that person, of course, they're going to pick up on things that we didn't, that myself and my client might not have heard, because it's always hard to track one person's conversation, but it's certainly hard to track what the person's saying and what they're not saying, and what the cultural mores are that are influencing. But what do we know about from the last session? Or what am I thinking that I'm really trying hard not to say? Right. But the other person also, if they're there as the witness, they're there as, and I'm sorry, I'll use the Latin, as the amanuensis. The beautiful thing is that role can always switch. And all of a sudden, now Lisa can ask a question, and I brought Lisa in as my witness, and now all of a sudden Lisa asks a question, blammo, I'm the witness, right? And if the client we're working with can see how that works and can see the trust that exists between us and how we can, fluidly, instantaneously, emergently, hand off leadership and responsibility, it's nice. It's a nice role modeling, but it also shows people that this is possible. And if it's working, not only is it possible, could be good.
Well, I mean, what's coming up for me as you say that is like real collaboration. Because I think we use the word collaboration in a lot of different arenas, and there's different levels of collaboration that become available. But this ability to like switch in and out of those roles seamlessly, I think there has to be clarity on that. Like, these are roles that are available within the collaborative ecosystem. We can freely move between the two, and whatever the other rules might be, but like we have this expectation of what it looks like to participate that way. And when you compare that to some of these other meeting structures, right? And even like I've been part of meeting structures where like, okay, you spend the first 5 minutes doing a clearing round, and then like you get out, then you just stirred up a bunch of emotions, and now you're not going to like spend time to address the emotions. This feels weird. But there's lots of different meeting structures that are not necessarily conducive to the like actual what it looks like to participate on that level. And like the thing too, for me, I think there are people who are naturally gifted in it, but I think there are people who lean into it and then they become more practiced at it. And so you could put them into most rooms and they come in with a desire to bring the parties together, and they come in with an ability to be able to like seamlessly move between the roles. Again, that people aren't necessarily saying, I'm putting this person in this room or in this conversation because of their ability to do that. And I think we're missing out because we're not doing that.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking, I love your point about expertise. I'm thinking about both meetings that I've been in. I mean, again, going back, back to the early Middle Ages, but as a generalist portfolio manager, right? I am never going to know as much either about internet pipelines, or restaurant supplies as the people that I'm talking to, right? Or luxury luggage, or indeed really expensive beverages, right? I mean, I know business models and I can ask questions about drivers, but the point is what I'm watching and what worked for me as a fundamental, as a not a chart driven portfolio manager, but as a fundamental portfolio manager, is it worked well for me is watching the interplay between the CFO and the CEO, between the chief operating officer and his or her boss, such that you could now it's too simple to say that if you can see trust and safety and authenticity and vulnerability in the relationship amongst an executive team, that will be mirrored throughout the whole organization. It's too simple, right? But it's also fairly simple to say, if they can't trust each other, right, that's probably mirrored very clearly throughout the organization. So I think the question has to be, especially in meetings, I mean, even if they're meetings just between you and me and one other person, somebody who doesn't know anything about the nature of the discussion. If you're talking about sophisticated internet marketing strategies, or actually direct mail, like I remember direct mail from 1986, sure, right? But if you're talking about things I don't know about, I still, as the witness, can monitor who's more excited, right? Who's listening to who, and who, when someone talks to Tracy, does Tracy just go, Now, you would never be that obvious, but do her eyes get gray? Does the light go down, right? And if, as you said, if I have skill, I probably wouldn't say, hey, Tracy, the light in your eyes just went down by 27 lumens. Right. So the lumens are a lot lower, right? I wouldn't say that, but I'd say, how does this fit with the agenda that we talked about 11 minutes ago, right? Just something to bring it back. And your witness can do that, even if all the witness is doing is actually just managing turn taking.
Mm. What, you mean you can't just pass the talking stick? That's not.
I love a talking stick. Right? But I can't hand this to you. You're in Canada, right? We can't share the talking stick, right? Yeah.
We're actually doing a very good job of sharing the talking stick, because we can get on excited tangents very easily. So I want to come back to this, like, something that came up for me in the last set of what you were talking about is this choice component. And I think a lot of times when we go into a conversation, especially in like a corporate environment, we get invited to a meeting. It's assumed we have to attend the meeting. There's these like maybe known or unknown power dynamics that are at play. So I know I'm just going to come and I'm going to listen. I'm not going to do anything. And then I might be doing the like reflecting, but I wasn't invited to do that role. So I'm not actually going to reflect back anything. And so there's like all of these things. And at the end of the day, the choice to participate is questionable. Okay. And so like when I think about, John and I were talking about this topic a little while back, and we were like, how can we test this? And I was like, I have a client who I think would be like totally open to this. So I'm going to ask them and see if they will play our game. And they did.
Thank you, yes. Client, for doing that.
Thank you, client. If you're watching, you know who you are. And they agreed to do that. And so we came in and we did the thing. And it was just like, one of the things that went into that conversation was every single participant in the conversation chose that. We chose to bring in an additional party because we've been working together for a good amount of time. I feel very confident in the value that I provide in that scenario, right? Like, this isn't about me being like, I'm not valuable enough, I need to bring. Nope, that's not the point of the conversation. But right now we have a dynamic. You only get my perspective, right? Like, we want this to be bigger. Why don't we bring in another perspective? And we didn't even give John any prep. I was just like, John,
less prep is almost always better, right?
Ask the questions you would ask, and that's all, right? Like, that's all I need you to do. And it was like the coolest thing, because then what I got to do, I'm the consultant, right? I got to be the observer. I did not have to be the active participant, which I do have to be when I'm in the only one in the role trying to coach something out of you. And so like, this was really cool, because then I could see like, oh, those words that John is using that are resonating more than like I've observed some of the words that I'm using. And I do think there's there is this like really important ego component of like, then can you be like, oh no, I can't bring John because what if John steals my clients from me? Like, you can't bring that energy into the room.
Which is down to trust, right? I don't
Yes.
have an answer for it, right? But that, it's down. The question is, and again, I think that's part of the learning, which can be, if my two friends I'm thinking about, it's to protect the innocent, we won't use their last names, but I'm thinking about like Lisa and Ed, right? But if I bring Lisa and Ed in, because I trust them, not just explicitly, right? We would we have a contract, but I trust them implicitly, right? These are people who are my wise friends, my wise mentors, right? And they've been great resources to me. I've been a resource to them, right? Of course, it always goes both ways, right? But in the interaction, with said client, be that client an individual or a team or a firm, in the interaction, if they can see, me and Lisa and Ed and me, if they can watch us trusting each other, like exactly like you're talking about, trusting each other, not only not to steal clients, but trusting each other, not to horn in on conversation, not to cut off, but actually not only just not to cut off, to be so constructive that that one of my colleagues could say, oh wait, stop right there, right? I think we want to say more about that, right? And they'll be right or wrong. They'll be right or wrong, right? And the people in the conversation will go, right, and they'll start talking more about that, or they'll go, no, we don't want to talk anymore about that, right? But the point is, if people can see that trust and I don't want to use buzzwords. I mean, trust, I suppose, is one too. But I was going to say the co-creativeness, or the communality, or the collaboration that arises from two people who trust and respect each other, right? Just watching that, and then also watching, learning, and also becoming a part of it, right? It's enormous. Can I tell one more story?
Yes.
I have a friend who's not dissimilar to you in that she is incredibly energetic, and she brought me along to meet some of her clients. We were in Stockholm. This is years ago, and she is so opinionated. She's so wise and opinionated. She says, John, I never do meetings that are less than 90 minutes. Less than 90. And I was like, that's fantastic, right? But so I resolved with her. I'm meeting all of these, all women-led companies. I mean, all the women CEOs of the companies that are her clients. I said, I'm not going to talk for the first hour, right? Which you could say that's impossible, but I did, and I took notes. I was witnessing, right? And then, of course, it happened when I did speak, and I didn't speak in minute 61, but when I did speak in minute 67, or God forbid, minute 73 of the meeting, and I wasn't just looking at, I've written down 37 questions. I'm going to go back to number 2. And, I mean, of course, it's what came up in the moment. But as soon as I said something, not only did the whole room just go, oh my God, he's spoken. Right? What? Right? But the other one was when we left, my colleague said, oh my God, John, she was an old asset management relationship manager that I worked on a firm I worked with. But she said, I just wish we were selling something, because in every meeting we sold those people. The problem is we're just not selling anything right now. But the fact is, somebody who knows that they've been listened to, because when I was taking notes, I wasn't taking notes on, my thoughts about the latest episode of Felicity, right? Right. And that was a deep cut. But somebody who knows that they're being listened to and has that reflected back to them. Think of the power of that, especially if they're getting it from you and from me at the same time, or from two people. They're hearing that.
Well, I think the interesting thing about that too is that a conversation like that can move in so many different directions. And I have no doubt that you actually had at least 37 things on there that you could have contributed in a meaningful way to the conversation. But I think the other thing that is a cool opportunity is to use that to bring it back around to something that was said at the beginning that actually holistically connects to a lot of the other things. And sometimes the people who bring that stuff to the room don't see that themselves, right? So like, they're equally passionate about their idea and they shared it because it's an important part of their job, or it's an important belief that they have. But they don't necessarily see how that connects to the holistic system. And when you can, or when somebody can bring that back around and show them, they're like, oh, I didn't even notice that was connected to that. And this creates an opportunity for people to understand their contribution in a more meaningful way as well.
Yeah. And I want to yes and on that one, because what's fascinating about that, somebody sort of monitoring the continuity, right? Because everyone's doing it. Every member of the conversation is doing it to a greater or lesser degree, right? We all have a given avenue that we can pay attention in. But the other thing I wanted to hit on is it's not the elephant in the room necessarily, but if I've got one McKinsey consultant, do I want to pay for a whole tranche of McKinsey consultants, right? Let's talk about the economics, and particularly the economics for the coaches or the mentors or the consultants doing it. They can say, well, it's either going to cost the client a lot more, or if it doesn't cost the client anymore, then all the people in the room are getting half or a third or 1/n of whatever their rate is. But the question then has to be asked, and I don't want to get into AI, not in this conversation, but the question then has to be asked is, what is the benefit to not just the client, but what's the benefit to the practitioners, right? To the coaches, to the consultants? Because if there is real benefit from this, and we're probably not going to get into pricing models either, like set this up for the next call, right? But there is benefit. Let's not talk about hourly rates. Let's talk about, some kind of, even how much benefit did you get? That's how much you should pay for it. But if the practitioners are getting that benefit too, then I'm going to be much happier in doing 10 or 20 sessions with my friends Tracy or John or whomever, right, than I am to be doing 30 sessions by myself. Because if we kick off that much more creative ferment in the discussion, right, one, it's more fun, and very likely there's much more value being created.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'm thinking about flow, right? Like this is also one of the things that I notice so often is there's not flow in systems, usually because we're restricting the outbound flow. And it's very easy to see this from the financial point of view, right? We're trying to save money. So we're trying to be efficient, right? So we are restricting flow. And there are opportunities and things like this, even to say like, if John is like, hey, I'm having this conversation over here, I'm like, oh my God, that would be so fun for me to participate in. Like, bring me into the room. I don't even need to get paid for that,
right.
like 190 minutes or whatever, because I know that that's going to create flow that happens. Like, oh, now we've realized that it would be really helpful to have a marketing brain in this conversation. So now we look at giving that budget, right? Like, there's in business, so often we are restricting the outflow of things, and restricting that flow out restricts the flow in. It's just the way a system works.
Scarcity. It's just scarcity, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And what you put in is what you get out. I won't mention a company either, but a great asset manager who I used to compete with, when they were trying to get people back into the office after COVID, they said, it's all right, come on Tuesdays and Thursdays, like that mandatory, you have to come in like Tuesday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday, but please, or not even please, you have to be here. But the point was, on those days, they'd say, there are going to be 2 or 3 hours that we're going to arrange meetings for you with people that you don't usually meet with, right? Not in your department, not in the large cap or the small cap or the emerging markets group, whatever, the marketing group or the accounting group, right? Somebody who's not in your group. And look, it's the information age. We can track who you've talked to. You're going to meet somebody and you might have nothing in common with this person, but all we're going to ask is that for 20 minutes, you learn something about them, right? You tell them something about you, you learn something about them. And of course those became, I don't want to do an Aesop's fable here, but of course those were favorite days, because not every conversation was a winner. But if you stay in your silo, you'll know really well what's in your silo. But one, you're not going to make a lot of new friends. And you aren't going to be introduced to those ideas. Like you said, maybe we need a marketing brain in here. And of course, as soon as you say that, I think we need a marketing brain. But what kind? Right? Maybe we need an operational brain in here, right? But is it the 30,000-foot view, or is it the absolute at the detail, or wait, maybe somewhere in between, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you can't have that conversation because it's really hard to be so creative and so omniscient that you're always, and I like to think of myself as both creative and omniscient. I'm not, by the way, but you can't be thinking at all times, do we need this brain? Do we need this kind of brain? Do we need this kind of brain? And if it's that kind of brain, at what level do we want that person, and how much of them, and who should they? You can't do it until you do it, right?
I would like to say until you feel it. And this also ties into what you were saying about having conversations with people that you might not immediately have purpose to have a conversation with. And this is why I'm a huge fan of LinkedIn and the possibilities of virtual chat because then you meet people like John and you're like, yes. I'm a big believer that humans feel introductions before they make introductions. And so, like, I know I have met John. I felt the vibe of John. I know this client. I know the vibe of that client. I feel like these two things are compatible. I haven't tested that these two things are compatible, but I believe I have enough input to believe, to have a hypothesis that this is going to add value. And there's a lot of times where we play that off. Like, that's our intuition, that's our feeling. And we're like, no, I don't have a logical reason to connect this middle manager ops person with this senior level marketer. I can't come up with a logical reason to do that. But I feel if you put these people in a room, that like something could happen.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it's your intention and also the acceptance. It is, you have this feeling. The question is, what kind of relationship do you have with the middle level ops person and the senior level marketer, such that how much do they trust you? So you say, feels good for me. I'd like you guys, and I don't want you to give it just 15 minutes, because 15 minutes, right? It's not, I want you to give it 30, right? I need you to
go for lunch. Go for extended lunch.
I need you to push past, because there probably will be some discomfort. You don't know anything about marketing. And let me be honest, he doesn't know anything about operations, right? So there's gonna be like there's gonna be a little bit of syncing up. You're gonna have to like teach each other a few words and language, a little of the thieves' cant of your guild, right? But yeah, I need you to push past it, right? But the question is, they will do it again, but it's back to trust. How much do they trust? How much do they trust you? And that's where again, we're not talking about how we pitch this, but in talking to the client, talking to the prospective client of someone is, oh, well, you're not getting one consultant, you're getting 3 consultants. You're getting a team. I never enter the room without my senior and my junior, right? We come 3, right? But I mean, I think it has to be, like you say, it has to be experienced, and that's a wonderful test, because when it's experienced, then does it add value, right? Does it add value? Or when it's experienced, they go, okay, first off, I'm not getting anything from the 3 of you. I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be getting anything from even any one of you individually. I'm pretty sure if you brought 9 people, I wouldn't be getting anything, right? Which is it's a sad test, but it's still an experiment that delivers a result.
Right. And I think one of the things that people need to take into consideration too, and I want to get to Peter's question. I feel like we just keep going down this line. We are coming back to it, Peter, is that we don't, the word that's coming up for me is permission, right? We just don't give ourselves permission to do things that don't have like an immediately tangible benefit. If I put an ops person and a marketing person in a room, I don't know what can happen. It might be a terrible meeting. I might put 9 people in the room. But we also have this like trauma response to like, I had 9 McKinsey consultants and they delivered nothing to us for $1 million.
And it cost me £500,000 quid. I can't believe I still have a job, but I just burned £500,000 on that, right? I don't want to do that again. Yeah.
So
what is Peter's question?
Yeah, I just want to wrap up that thought in terms of like the fear and the scarcity versus the possibilities. And if we're in a scenario where we're not generating what we want to be generating today, more fear and scarcity is going to make that even smaller.
Yeah. More restricted, more, less willingness to, and it's not just trying new things, although it's very much a part of it. It's less willingness to consider that doing anything different from what we've always done, right, can provide a benefit, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of my favorite, the poet David White, who does a lot of corporate consulting too, he says, if you want to change the conversation at your company, he said, the first thing is you have to stop having the conversation that you're having. Stop that one.
And it's almost immediately stoppable by inviting another person into the room, a different party.
Yeah.
Right. And then, yes, invite someone that you have a trustworthy relationship with to some degree, but like also somebody who's like, who are the people? There are people in your conversations that keep you in the same conversations. and there's people in your life that invite you into different conversations. So who are those people? Invite them to your next management offsite. Okay, Peter's question. What is your level of concern about the observer effect? I think this is an interesting component. So for those of you who are like, this sounds like something I should know. The observer effect, I looked it up, is the phenomenon where the act of observation, measurement, or attention alters the system being studied. So like now there's a system over here, it's doing a thing, and I put an observer in there, and now just act of putting an observer in there alters the system. So, but I have my thoughts, John, but you go first.
I'm gonna surprise myself and you by being brief. I think that as long as that's known, which of course in this collaboration it is, in this partnership it is, and it's not only known but transparent, right? With the client that you and I would be talking to, we'd say we know this is going to make it different. That's what we want.
That's
right?
The point.
But the other thing is you brought the observer in, and the observer is going to change the state of the whole system, because there is no Archimedean point where you can lever the system without being a part of it, without affecting and being a part of it. The point is the witness is going to be watching the system as in its status quo, which of course it won't be because of the observer effect. But the other thing is then, because in this case where I was the new person and you're the old one, right? You are observing not just what has always happened, but you're also observing, oh, how is this different from what went before because of the introduction of the new person? So I think, again, it just gets back to how much is what is intended and what is communicated transparently to all the participants. How about you, Ms. Borison?
Well, I agree. A lot of times when you're trying to put an observer into something, it's because there's something about that doesn't work. And so is the value actually in observing exactly the behaviors that doesn't work? Or is the value in I've put an observer in that room and now I've created the possibility of behaviors that work manifesting themselves? So I think that is an important point. But also, I think this assumes the observer effect assumes there's one observer instead of what we've talked about so far, which is everyone plays the role of observer. We pass around the baton of the role of observer, which changes the concept, right? So like, yes, if I take one observer and I plunk them in a space, then I'm going to change the behavior of the whole system. And if every one of the people, I'm not plunking in and out, I'm a big proponent of plunking in an external outside observer.
Yeah, a random.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that has some kind of like, again, purpose. You're doing that for a reason, right? But at the same time, it's different than just saying, I was part of a business where we hired like a process coordinator. I can't remember exactly the job title, but the point of their job was to go through and document all the things that people were doing. And exactly this thing happened, right? So their job is to go in and document it. It identified gaps in the system. So there had to be different behavior to fill the gaps. That's what happened, right? And this is what happens with the observer effect. But that's different than saying, well, I'm in a customer experience team and we're going to observe each other. We all play the role of observer. We're all following the same manual, but we're all doing it a bit differently. We accept that we have different personalities and we're going to interpret things in a little bit differently. And we're going to play the role of observer on everybody. I think that's a little bit different than the scenario of just plopping an observer in, both of which his job is to create something different. If we were all so happy with how our marketing department was running, I don't think we'd feel the need to plop in an external observer and be like, what's happening here? We would know what's happening.
Yeah. I like your plopping. Plopping could be one thing, but plopping can also be a pebble in a pond. It can be a pebble, yes. Rippling out. And I love your point about, if it's you and me and unnamed client, you know who you are. But if it's you and me, right, then there's three people in the room. I'm brought in to be the observer, and I am observing, and then also sometimes chiming in and interacting. But when I'm talking, right, then I've got two observers, right? I've got Tracy and client observing, and I have a third observer because generally we all tend to pay attention to ourselves when we talk too, right? So the question there is, and then now we're getting into incredibly deep waters, and you're already there. I didn't go there. But if you add, now we go to a 4-person or a 5-person or 7 people, right? This is why there's always a magic number for team size. Of course it varies. Let me give you the consultant's answer. It depends. But Dunbar's not completely wrong, right? There's a magic number for family size and tribe size and everything else. But the reason for that is the complexity of all those interactions. If all of a sudden I've got 7 people, right? How many conversations is each observer observing when there are 7 people in the room, right? So gets back to the point. You said it in the ad for this, or in the marketing materials for this talk, right? I want to add, it's the power of 2 can be great depending on the person, right? We want to have, it's got to be a different view such you have this observer effect, but it has to be a complementary view such that we're not, let's not start talking about synergy and dysergy or positive and negative feedback. I might as well be doing quantum mechanics, which is right back to the observer effect. Thank you very much. Done. Right.
See what we did there? Loop back around. No, and I think this is really important too, also because having a second person come in who's going to have the exact same perspective of you doesn't create, like, one of the things, actually, for those of you who haven't been on my LinkedIn profile in a while, I changed my banner because I was playing with it. And I was like, my thing I care about is like point A, point B, the gap. The possibilities exist in the gap. And so if I'm having a conversation, which is why John is one of my favorite conversation partners, where everything is like very aligned from a values point of view, like what we believe about humanity and all of these things are the same, but our perspectives can be very divergent, which means there's more possibility that exists. If I have 2 viewpoints that are very close to being identical, the possibilities are very small. And this is what happens a lot in like leadership team echo chambers, right? I have my perspective, you have your perspective. We're always working with this gap, right?
I probably hired you. I hired you because I liked I thought, your perspective is not mine because we are individual people, but I hired you because your perspective is really close. It's really close, right? And then we hired somebody else and we hired somebody else, right? Then you got this poor schmuck over here, right? Who's got a different perspective. Nobody talks to him. Right? Yeah.
Well, and I 2 stories on that front, because I remember when I worked in corporate, I was part of the hiring process, but I did not make the final hiring decision because I was going on maternity leave. So it was like supposed to cover my maternity leave. And the person that they chose was like, had almost identical experience to mine, like started in events, like very, very similar. And the thing that was so interesting is that it didn't work at all. Right? It was like almost meant to be a like plug and play of me, but it didn't work, right? Like there was too much similarity. There was no new value that person could possibly add because they were like 10 years behind me on the exact same path. Right? And so like that was interesting. But then one of the things, and I think about this, I'm sure I've shared it on the show before. When I worked at the Brick, I played basketball with some of the guys in the warehouse on the delivery team. I worked in marketing, right? These 2 departments don't interface on a regular basis, right? Maybe you sit in the quarterly meetings in the same room, but you don't sit together. You don't talk to each other, right? Like you don't do that. And I remember having this conversation with them. They were so frustrated about how the routing was done. And then I'm over here being like, why don't you just tell the VP? Like, that seems like something he would want to know. And they were like, no, we can't talk to the VP. And I was like, well, no one told me I can't talk to the VP of transportation.
So let me do it. Yeah.
Right. And so it was interesting because I was like, there's so much of these perspectives, but like a marketer would never know that unless you went outside of your normal job duties to like listen with a like interested ear to like, oh, like there could be like a possibility here, because it's like I would never think about that. But it's always the thing I remember because it's like the farthest apart. And I was like, oh yeah, that's so smart.
One of the smartest people, one of the smartest people I know, we won't name names or the company, but let's just say that like huge telecoms companies are not known for their innovative thinking, right? But he was a CIO at a huge telecom company, and he spent, I don't think it was a day a week, but at least a day every other week, right? A day every other week on the customer complaint line, right? Listening to the big corporate customers complain about how crap, trying to be decent, about how crap the service that they're paying incredible money for, about how crap it is. And he said, it's the same thing as if you have another person in this room, right? You're saying to the client, I care enough that I want this, not impartial because this person's a human being, but I want a third resource. He said, if I did nothing else, I let the client complaint team know that the CIO cares about this, right? That the chief information officer is going to, but of course, he said, the knowledge I had, right? Because these guys, the team, the client complaint team, of course, they're filling out their forms and they're solving problems. But does that feed up to the C-suite, right? And if you try to build a pipeline to feed up to the C-suite, which we all should do, right? That's hard to create too, right? We need to have these interactions between people because one, you get real things happen in real conversations, but also a real conversation is not going to be documented by the process person. And I take nothing away from from ISO 9000 and 9001 and all. I take nothing away from all of that. I don't like it personally, right? But I mean, you can't say, okay, have the conversation like this because then you will uncover all the things that we haven't uncovered yet. If you have a defined system for discovering the things that are yet to be discovered, good luck.
Well, and it's also it's making an assumption that you know what is to be uncovered, which you don't, because if you did, you would have uncovered it already.
Or you'd at least have a process, right? That's where we're into like Donald Rumsfeld. But that's where we're into the known knowns and the known unknowns. But it's really the unknown unknowns that are going to bite you in the rear, in the patootie. But what's worse is the unknown knowns, right? It's what Mark Twain said. It's not what you know. It's not what you don't know. It's what you know that ain't so, right? It's the thing that you know that is just wrong, right? And you're never going to write a process that says, okay, well, unless your process is every day in every way, let's examine everything we think we know, right? That's very hard to do.
And I don't actually think that that's possible. And one of my pieces of evidence of that is I was doing this focus group for a project I was working on, and we had to put all of these people in the room because they had specific training background. Right? So we had a specific training background, brought all these people in the room. The biggest insight that came out of that meeting from a focus group point of view was that and this came up in just the intros, that one of the gentlemen makes glass fish in his spare time, right? And then we ended up having all of this conversation about glass, and this is a software focus group, right? So this was not in the list of questions I prepared, right? But there was so many ideas that came out of that, and that is a prime example of I don't know what I don't know, but that doesn't mean I can't use something that shows itself to move to something else. And that's where this power of emergence comes, is that if we had learned the glass thing, but we just did it as a check the box activity in the intros, right? And never referenced it again. And I just asked my questions, we wouldn't have got most of the insight that we took away from that focus group. And that doesn't add to the value, it decreases the value.
Yeah. And I'll make fun of myself here, right? Maybe the glass fish really worked, but he started talking about his X-Men comic books, right? It's all, I bring it up because everything is context. The glass fish really worked for reasons that I don't know because I wasn't there, right? But it's all context. If somebody starts talking about their baseball trading cards from 1979, you can go, I'll give you another minute on this, but I don't know where this is going, right?
Yeah.
But it's all context. It's all context. And of course, again, the context is what, and I said we weren't going to talk about AI, but context is, I think, where it's not to take away anything from LLMs, but context, because context requires not just each of us doing a read against how this bounces off, how it either hurts or harmonizes with our own thinking. It's actually our paying attention to what's happening in the room and to seeing, does this create more verve and more momentum, or is it an absolute right? And like, okay, no more of that, right? Like, you know, I don't know if you noticed, everyone was very close to dying in the last 30 seconds, right? And everyone's their own responsibility, but I'd rather not leave this room with 6 people.
That'd be good. Probably a good
But
contribution.
speaking of, what are we okay? What's our timing? What
Oh yes. Well, we're gonna wrap up right away here. But I wanted we wrap up when the conversation's ready to be wrapped up, John.
That will never happen. That will never happen.
It will. I will make it happen. But I love this like when we're thinking about like the power of 2 and bringing someone into a room and whether or not we can extrapolate the specific value that's going to come out of that. One of my favorite use cases is when you're like in a conversation with a person and you say a thing which you didn't really plan to say, right? It just came out for whatever reason. And then someone's like, oh, that reminds me of this book that I read, blah, 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 blah. And then they go off and they start talking about the concept in the book. And then that takes the conversation in a specific direction. Like, this is what X-Men made me think of too. But like that reminds me of the time that this
I got good stuff too.
Guy. Yeah. I'm sure. No, we all have good stuff, and we all have nerd stuff. It's fine. But the point is that if you look at any book, right, any book any of us have ever read, we did not retain 100% of that book. We retain.
I accept. You are correct. Yeah, you're correct.
As much as I feel like John tries harder than most people.
No. John doesn't try. That's the beauty of it. It just happens. Yeah.
But this, like, you and I had a conversation about this, and you were like, "Oh, I'm reading this book, and it's making me think of like these 7 things that it talks about." And that is like the hidden potential, right? That is the type of thing that is hidden potential in your organization. And when you go in with a strategy to extract hidden potential, you don't know what that is. It's like, so Nicholas, my 7-year-old, very into Minecraft right now. And so what I understand is that you need a diamond pickaxe to mine obsidian. Okay.
It's value added. That's new news. That's new news to me. Thank you.
There you go. I might be wrong, but let's just go with it for a second. So if I have an iron pickaxe, I can't mine obsidian. Our hidden assets are obsidian. And if I go in with a strategy, I'm going in with an iron pickaxe. I will not find it. It's not the right tool for the job. I have to have a diamond pickaxe, and a diamond pickaxe is freedom to chat, emergent conversation, right? The ability to
let's go back to your word from earlier, permission, right? Yeah. Permission. We have to give ourselves permission to ask the open-ended and maybe even stupid question. And then we have to give the person permission to answer it or not answer it, right? And then also maybe to say, yeah, so I know you know what pet peeves are, but let's just do the old reversey pet peeve. Like, what's something that's super insignificant, almost nothing, and yet it's given you disproportionate, almost crazy joy or delight this week? Someone will go, I haven't had any joy this week, right? And you go, oh, now I feel like a real jerk for asking the question. But let's give ourselves a little more time, right? You must like something, peanuts. I don't know, the X-Men comic books.
People aren't used to finding joy in small things. Actually, I had someone ask me this on LinkedIn, like, what's bringing you joy? And I'm like, literally, my son just brought me a chocolate butterscotch cookie, and like, this is bringing me a huge amount of joy right now. So much so, I'm gonna go eat another one and get even more joy out of that one.
Diminishing returns. The economist in me says you can't just keep eating them forever.
That's true. 2 is the 3 was diminishing returns. Now I just feel gross and like it's not going in a good direction. But these are important things to remember when we are talking about the power of 2, is that there is this great potential here, but there is permission, like real permission that needs to go in that. There's real trust that needs to go into that. There is the desire to discover, right? That we're like, hey, you want to bring me into this conversation? Then what I want to give you is something you didn't have before. I don't know what that is until
maybe
I'm in
even
the conversation.
A diamond pickaxe.
Maybe even a diamond pickaxe.
I don't want to go for the last word, but I will give you my last word, which is to your point about discovering what we don't know yet, right? You talk about the gap between. I want to work in the gap between, right? Kind of, it's not my words, but I want to use like Miles Davis's, right? Yeah, that music is the space between notes, right? Or I'll come back to Miles Davis in a second. Or what I like to say, if music is a space between notes, then in the magic, then the human relationship is right. Is this? It's not just the space between people, right? But it's the space between our words and the space between the feelings that we're having. What's in between those feelings, right? But then I'll go back to Miles Davis one more time when somebody said, "How do you know if something is a good note or a bad note? Right? How do you know if that was a wrong note?" And he said, "I don't know." He said, "What was the next note? You know, was that a good idea? I don't know. What came after it? What did it spark? Right? You know, because we can tell, like we know what cascading failure looks like, right? We know that, right? We don't need to talk about any current events in the world right now, right? But we also know, if we go back, we know what you know engendering momentum feels right? You know it at any dinner party, you know it at any family gathering, you know it in any meeting room. And the problem with corporate meeting rooms is that they seem to be designed to suck out momentum, right? But you know in a meeting when somebody says something and invites the comment, or somebody says something, yeah, I did this really stupid thing this morning, and everyone's like, wait a second, right? Did somebody is it going to be that kind of meeting, right? The CFO just said the stupid, and that was really stupid. Oh my God, that was so stupid, right? But we all can tell. And so the question is, what can we do with our words, with our presence, with our listening, as either the one-on-one or a two-on-one, or you pick the number of people in the room, but what can we do that is momentum seeking and momentum engendering, rather than and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with trying to converge. We need to converge at some point, but we don't need to converge all the time, because if you converge all the time, you only get here, and then you just kind of keep going like this, and yeah, right.
Well, in this, the difference between doing diverge and converge like this and diverge and converge like this, like one has directionality and creates the potential for momentum. Without any directionality, you can go back and forth like this really fast.
Oh, I really like that. That's good. There's our last word. Right? Or mirror, right? I like it. Tracy.
So, okay, yes, I'm going to
much.
just a couple really great comments I want to bring in from, not questions, so we don't have to talk anymore, but just really great comments from the audience. So Gary sharing, real conversations are essential for the building of pipelines. I think we would admit the building of anything. Layla is sharing, we can't know everything, always new things to learn. Yes, this is the point. And when we also, again, from that ego perspective, aren't like, I'm not supposed to know everything here, but I know that this person's energy can add something to this room. I don't know what, but I know something. And then Lauren has got a series here, open curiosity over associational memory. I love that, because like, instead of just saying, these are all the things I will always know, and saying like, here's my assets, like, oh man, if I get to create new assets on the daily and per minute, because I am openly being curious, let's go do that. And Gary's last note, make sure you work side by side, not facing off with each other.
Darn it, Gary. I meant to do the call like this. I meant to do it like this. I'm sorry. What a great idea, Tracy. What a great idea.
Face this way. There's so, I mean, I think what we've discovered here today, and I mean, probably most of you who came here had believed this coming into the conversation, but the possibilities that arise when we create the meaningful conditions for them to be so. And we have an opportunity, dare I say, a greater opportunity to do that when we explore the potential of the power of two and not just the power of one.
What she said.
John, thank you, my friend. Such a wonderful conversation, as always. If people would like to continue the conversation of the power of two with you, where is the best place for them to find you?
Well, I think just if you came here from LinkedIn, just find me on LinkedIn, right?
Yes.
And or indeed ask your friend Tracy. She knows. She's got the bat phone. She could call.
She has the bat phone. Yeah. And like, This is also fun. I'm just going to share this. The show is over, but if you want to stay for fun, Tracy time. John, sometime, well, I will message John and be like, hey, John, how are you? And he's like, I'm just going to call you. And I'm going to be like, oh, I have time to talk to John right now. And you like, it's also just an interesting exercise. And like, what are we creating permission for? And are we creating permission for the people who we know who have these diverse or encouraging, amplifying ways of thinking? Are we giving them access to us and how they can contribute to us? Because there might be greater opportunity for that for a lot of people.
I do feel like what you just said is at the core of what we talked about, although we didn't talk about that, right?
Yeah.
But the question is, what are we allowing, or how much are we giving permission to? Because the problem is, of course, that whole thing about converging, right? We can talk about fear and love and scarcity and abundance, but all of which is all apt, right? The question is, how much are we allowing for the space between notes? How much are we allowing for the possibilities that exist in, and I'm sorry for using vocab, right, in the liminal, right? How do we get to the edge of what we know? Not maybe 3 leaps beyond what we know, but I certainly don't want to be 1 leap inside of what I know, because it's boring. Back to Lauren's point, right? That's just associated memory. Somebody says, hey, I went to Disney World. And the first thing someone says they go to Disney World, they go, well, did you go to Space Mountain? Because Space Mountain is so awesome. Let me tell you about my time at Space Mountain, right? No. You say, how was it? What was it like, right? Because I hate it, right? I kind of want to hear it before I tell you how much I hate it. I kind of want to say, well, maybe you loved it. And she'll go, oh, well, what did you love? I need to get out of this conversation fast, right? But yes, the question is, how much are we allowing for amplifiers, right? For someone to amplify, for someone to come in and maybe make a helpful suggestion, right? The answer to that is how much we believe we are capable of both hearing a helpful suggestion, but also how much are we capable of acting on one? How much are we capable of generating one ourselves? Because no one can really help us, right? If somebody makes a helpful suggestion, it either has to be something that we go, ooh, oh, that's good. I can work with that, right? So it all comes back to, and now I'm forgetting what Lauren put on, right? It was internal, right? It was the felt. I can't. What were her first words versus associated?
Open curiosity.
Yeah, open curiosity. How open can we be to not just what's happened and what's happening? How open can we be to what might happen? Mm-hmm. And now I feel like I've gotten suitably mystical that now I can. Can you do the special effects that I just vanish in a puff of smoke right now?
No.
Right.
This is the thing with the live show.
Glinda the Good Witch.
Just floats away in a bubble. No, but actually, I don't want anybody to float away in a bubble. I want people to stay in the conversation, because what we did today is like introduce a concept that is a big concept. There's lots of reasons why people don't do it. And like, let's play with it. If all of us in the chat here today together, and everybody who was in the chat that didn't actually chat or was listening live but didn't chat, got into this, right? Like continued the conversation, there's a lot of possibility there. So connect with John, connect with me, connect with each other. Let's bring this power of 2 to life in as many ways as we can. That's my challenge for everybody for this week.
I accept. And I hope, I mean, I add my wish. Please do, right? This is not, it's not marketing, nor is it sales, but this is a topic that probably, I don't want to say deserves, because that sounds so, puritanical, but this is a topic that very likely will benefit. The topic will benefit from your participation and from widening the network around it. The topic will benefit. And I'm just going to make the somewhat provocative statement that very likely you will too.
Now we've had like 3 poof ending moments, so we're going to officially end it.
All right. There, I'm going to figure out how to leave the studio, but
well,
thank you so much.
I'm going to end the stream, and then then you can just turn it off. So thank you, my friend. Thank you, everybody, for chiming in an hour early. And until next time, permission to do you. Bye, folks.